What is the inner critical voice and why is it running and ruining your life? We all have an inner critical voice, each and every one of us. And these really form and come together when we're very, very young, almost when we are like sponges absorbing everything around us. And when we see judgment that is projected onto us, or even judgment that's projected onto other people, we absorb that judgment. And it actually becomes a part of our superego, which is constantly talking to us all of the time. Unfortunately, I wish the superego was more kind, was more gentle with us, but our superegos are harsh, they're critical, they're negative, they're fearful, they're all of those things that keep us really small and stuck when we listen to them. And so imagine a small child absorbing all of this judgment and anger and blame that through the years we pick up on, and then imagining that becoming a part of our sense of self, becoming a part of our identity. And for many people, this inner critical voice is running 24 hours a day. People become so accustomed to the inner critical voice that they don't even really have the awareness that it's on. It's almost like it's on in the background. You're in a room and the TV is on in another room, and you're not really like focused on it, but your mind is still picking up the words. And the tricky thing is the subconscious is listening all of the time on a moment by moment basis. And the subconscious is listening to that inner critical voice saying all of those harsh and critical and negative and painful and fearful things 24 hours a day. And don't you know that the subconscious is listening to that, hearing that, allowing it to soak in, and that is absolutely transforming your experience as it does so. So a lot of people ask me, well, how do I become aware of my inner critical voice? And the first thing is that you're probably more aware than you think you are. We all have these parts that are kind of talking inside of us all day long. And if you listen, you will identify a part of you or an aspect of you that you hear. And when I'm even saying this to you, I bet there are a lot of you out there that are saying, I know what she's talking about. Like, I know that voice. I know that voice so well. And yes, you do. It's the voice that's always on. Every single move you make, whether it's with a new job or going into a different social situation or purchasing a car and having to deal with someone that's selling you something, or anything in the world, that voice, especially in novel situations or anything fearful, anything that could cause any kind of disturbance or problem in your life, the inner critical voice will get really loud. In new relationships, when trying to connect with new people, in relationships that we have that are challenging or difficult, people that we might be wary of or a little nervous being around, perhaps because they overtake us or are really powerful, or perhaps erratic drivers. Basically anything can be an example, but we all have the voice, and it doesn't take long. Literally, you can listen to your thinking possibly for 10 or 15 minutes, and that's a really long time to listen to your thinking. So if you even try listening to your thinking for 10 or 15 minutes and you listen for a minute and then you kind of stop and go out and forget, and then you come back and you listen for a minute and then you stop and come back, and so on and so forth, you will hear that voice. And so what's really important is first, and you've probably heard me say this before, is becoming aware of it. Because we can't work with something unless we know that it's there, unless we can sense it out, unless we know like, aha, that's it, that's the voice. I need you to be able to say that's the voice in order to work with it. And so anytime you're feeling some intensity, again, around going into a new situation, talking to your boss, talking to your spouse, or around something that's challenging, or anything around your self-worth or self-value, or you're feeling insecure or not confident, any of those situations, if you listen up, you will hear this voice. Again, we all have it. Now, some of us, again, this is always on a continuum, so we're all on the continuum, and some of us have more intense or stringent voice than others, but we all have this voice. So again, the first thing is to just be aware that it's there. And what a lot of people do, not on purpose, is that they become aware that it's there, and then they have a lot of judgment towards themselves that they have this voice. Because if you actually listen to this voice, the voice sounds crazy. The voice, imagine someone in your living room, sitting on your couch, having coffee with you, talking the way this voice in your head talks. You would think this person is out of their minds crazy. And yet we listen to this voice all day long. We listen to this craziness all day long. And yet we would never, ever allow someone else to talk to us this way. We would never talk to someone else this way, but yet when it's in our heads, there is less of a censor, there's less of a filter, and it just all comes in. And most importantly, we're so accustomed to listening to it, believing it, and I will go so far as to say outright trusting it, that this stuff just comes in. There's no barrier, there's no defense against it. Once you become aware of it, and if you need to, even taking some paper with you or your phone and jotting down some notes as you hear some of these like harmful, malicious words come in can be helpful, just to identify like a sense of what your mind is saying to you throughout the day. Because most of us, like I was saying a moment ago, we trust our minds. We listen to our minds, and listening to our minds is actually one of the most dangerous things we can do. Taking our thinking for granted, taking our thinking at face value, not listening to our thinking is harmful, it's dangerous to us. There's all kinds of things that will come in under the radar that are uncensored, half-truths, or all full out not true, all kinds of things that we actually have to be very cautious of listening to. And most people are so highly identified with their minds that they trust it. It's almost like an altar that people go to in the sense of answers, or when they're scared or when they're overwhelmed. They go to this space for mind or peace of mind or advice. And that's not what they get back. What they get back is a heap of all that negativity, all that fear, all that overwhelm. Again, when we can become aware of like, wow, I had no idea that this stuff was coming in. I had no idea that this voice doesn't have to be all of me, that it's a part of me, and I can identify it as something that is natural and I took on as a young child, but it's not all of me. And we don't have to judge that voice or ourselves for having that voice. I have a lot of clients that judge the judgment. They judge that they have a voice. Many people think like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have this in my head, this voice going all the time? So don't judge it. Just know that it's natural, but also know that just because it's there doesn't mean that you have to buy into it, and doesn't mean that you have to believe it. And just a couple tips on working with this voice. Really what you want to do with the inner critical voice is poke holes in it. Anything that you can where you can see something behind the screen. Because for a lot of us, again, taking this at face value, it seems like this huge apparition or God or something that's like coming down from the mountains and telling us the truth. And truly what it is nothing more than this internalized judgment that I was talking about from childhood. For example, one thing that can be helpful, it might feel a little strange at first, is when you hear this voice perhaps saying like you're not worth it, or I'm not worth it, or you're stupid, or I'm stupid, or why would anyone listen to you? Why would anyone listen to me? Or whatever those things are, is to challenge it, to actually go into a dialogue with it. Feel free to ask your inner critical voice questions, for example. And what you will find is that it doesn't have much ammunition to come back. It might answer one question in a mean way right away, but ultimately it's like a match. You blow it out and it just has kind of the flame, the smoke going up, and then it disappears. It's gone. The same way with the inner critical voice, there's nothing behind it. There's no substance. There's no right or wrong. There's no meaning behind it. And the more you can begin to see, like, this has no wisdom behind it. Like, I'm challenging it. Like, it's saying like, you did a shitty job, and you say, well, I actually think I did a fine job, or actually I think that you're wrong, or whatever it is. Begin to be empowered over this voice. Begin to stand up to it. Begin to tell it that it's wrong, that it's not true. And you will see again that it doesn't have anything to say to you. It doesn't have anything to come back with. There's no substance there. And another helpful thing that can help you to look at is if the inner critical voice comes up as the word I or me. If you're hearing comments like, I'm so selfish, or I'm so stupid, or I'm so wrong, versus I versus you is what I meant. I statements like, I'm so stupid versus you're so stupid. Those are very, very different. So if you're hearing more of a you're so fill in the blank, something really negative and bad, that's less internalized than someone that's thinking I. Now, again, we're all in a continuum, and none of this is really bad, but just in the sense of how we approach it, how we work with it, it's really good to pinpoint Am I hearing the word I, or am I hearing you? Because if you're hearing you, then it's something that hasn't solidified completely into your identity because you're not hearing the word I. And if you are hearing the word I, that's all right. Just know that this is something that you have to begin to stand up to and work with, and you absolutely can. And you will see that it begins to back down, not because it's scared. This doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have feelings. It's not a person. It is not you. It is just a voice. It's internalized judgment. Begin to play around with this voice. Don't take it so seriously. Begin to tell it that it's full of shit. Begin to tell it whatever you need to in order to create space between you and the voice, and begin to see that it's not you, and actually it's bullying you. And again, going back to the living room and the person on your couch, would you not ask them to leave? It's time to do the same thing with the voices in your head.